Welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have a very special guest, Steven Pivnik. Steven is an international keynote speaker, business advisor, best-selling author, and serial entrepreneur specializing in information technology. Steven would go on to grow his company, Binary Tree, to over 200 employees across 12 countries, ultimately leading to a successful exit to a $4 billion company, Quest Software. In addition, for all you sports fans out there, Steven is a marathoner, an ultramarathoner, a triathlete, including IRONMAN, and mountaineer, set to scale all 7 summits. So without further ado, Steven Pivnik.
Courtney, I'm turning red from that introduction. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. It is so exciting to have you, Steven. One kind of perspective I wanted to take with this podcast is obviously I've read the book, but maybe for our audience members who have not yet read the book, I do want to at least hold it up here. Certainly get your copy. Steven was actually the first book choice of Courtney's Corner. So thank you for allowing me to promote that book, Steven.
Oh, that's fantastic. I've never been the first selection for a new book club, so I'm honored.
Absolutely. Well, it perfectly aligned with the components of Plenty of Positivity, obviously being life, sport, and career. But nevertheless, to get started, I wanted to kind of focus on Steven Pivnik as the person. So we're going to set the book aside, maybe for those even audience members who may not have read the book yet. But if we could just briefly start off with an introduction of yourself.
Sure. Wow. 5-minute elevator pitch on me. Well, I'm an immigrant. My family brought me to this country from the former Soviet Union when I was 3 years old. It was a pretty rough time over there. My family is Jewish, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism that was really making life very difficult for my family. So we immigrated to the United States with a 6-month stop in Italy to awaiting our paperwork and visas. And when we got here, we basically lived the immigrant lifestyle, right? So we had a little bit of assistance from an organization that helped immigrants, but that was temporary. My parents and grandparents, they needed to grind it out, which I detailed in my book, really, to put food on the table and a roof over our heads. And I learned an incredible, work ethic from them. And that really served me well, because when it came time for a career of my own, I grinded that out from job after job, which eventually led me to, starting my own business. And then the first 2 were failed attempts, but the third one hit, and the rest is kind of history. So after that successful business journey, and after my successful Ironman journey and triathlete journey to get to the World Championship in Kona, Hawaii, I decided to chronicle both those journeys with tips and tricks and lessons learned, with the intention to really motivate the reader to set and go after large goals. As the IRONMAN mantra says, which I wholeheartedly believe in, anything is possible.
Wow, that is incredible. Just journey, and to kind of take a step back to how family could play such a positive role and impact on our lives. I know you mention it in the book, but you pay tribute heavily to your grandparents, making that travel from the former Soviet Union to now the US, and how that would really pave the way for the success that you would have in entrepreneurship and on your entrepreneurial journey. But, I think when you speak about the grind, something that reminds me is my father would always tell me to never be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
And that sticks with me to present day. And he was actually he was in corporate America for quite some time,
Okay.
and then jumped into a lot of entrepreneurial ventures. And it really played such a profound impact when we talk about parents and their influence, to never be afraid to fail and to know that it is going to entail the grind. Like when you
Sure.
were speaking about that in the book, it really does translate to sport, into excelling in sport, especially at the highest level. But as we move forward, I was on your website, and Steven, this is epic. I found this quote. So I want to make sure I read this correctly to the
Okay.
audience. Visualize success. No matter the hill, no matter the challenge, you either fail fast, learn, and move on, or suck it up, buttercup, and get her done. And I have to, the first thing that I thought of was Larry the Cable Guy, get her done. So I had to laugh when I saw that. But if you don't mind, just how did that quote resonate with you enough to put it on your website?
I mean, I forget where I first learned or heard "Get Her Done." Maybe it was the cable guy, but I just love I just love that. Whenever it hurts, whenever it's too tough, whenever it seems like the end is never going to come or success isn't going to come, I just use that repeatedly. Just shut up, get her done.
Well, and I think that's so true because, like you said, I mean, you took this journey literally to the extreme, both in business as well as in sport with marathons, triathlons. But it speaks so much to the resilience, and the path along the way is not going to be easy. There's going to be ups and downs, and you have
Sure.
already mentioned it, but Binary Tree was not the first success. Like, you had to actually build up to that success with other companies that you speak about in the book. And you talk about how I know one incident was about failure. And I always talk about like perceived failure because I don't believe in failure. I feel like you could learn so much along the way, even when you do make mistakes,
Sure.
that will lead you ultimately to the grand success. In your case, of course, Binary Tree. But could you maybe walk us through the entrepreneurial mindset as you would come to America, how that played such an influential role into starting your own company and going the entrepreneurial route?
Sure. So when we first came to America, my father got a job as an air conditioning repairman. That was his skill set, mechanics. So he started from working for somebody as an air conditioning, repair person. Then he got another job as a automobile mechanic, and then he eventually opened up his own body shop and basically went into business for himself. So I saw him take that journey from working for somebody else to eventually getting up enough courage to start a business of his own. And I took a very similar approach, right? I definitely didn't have the credibility or ability to start a business by myself when I first learned my programming craft, which, by the way, I dropped out of college to go learn how to be a computer programmer because they weren't teaching computer programming in college in the 80s.
Wow.
So I took a computer programming course, programming mainframe computers, which I'm really dating myself right now. So after I learned that craft, just like his path, I got a job working for somebody else. My first job was for Reader's Digest, which was it still is a large publishing company, but it was much better known in the 80s. Um, and then I got another job. Then I got another job because I just wanted a varied amount of experiences. And plus, I wanted to, increase my salary at the same time. So I accomplished, both by moving jobs several times until I finally got enough confidence to, to branch out and to go into business for my own.
That's incredible. And as you transition, how you would land with Binary Tree, it's truly incredible. I always say that there's no such thing as an overnight success,
Yeah.
but with your case, it seems like you would start, and there was such a need and a demand for what you were providing within information technology at the time. But leading up to that deal that you would make with IBM, could you walk the audience through how Binary Tree really came to be and leading up to that IBM deal?
Sure. So back in the day, there was no such thing as an app store. There was no such thing as SaaS, software as a service. When large companies needed a computer solution, I mean, in today's day and age, if a company needs a computer solution, they go online. There's probably 15 versions of anything, whether it be Salesforce, whether it be human resources, whether it be accounting, enterprise management. There's multiple competitors out there. You can just pick and choose and subscribe. Back in the day, there was no app store or SaaS. So if a large company wanted to automate a business process, they needed to write that program from scratch. And that's the business that we went into. We started writing custom applications for large companies. One of these custom applications was an email migration program. So there was a JP Morgan, the large bank. They were moving from one email platform to another, from Microsoft to IBM. And they needed to convert all of this email data because they wanted, when they went live with the new email program, they wanted all of their employees to have access to the same inbox, same calendar, same contacts. They didn't want any data to be lost. So we wrote them this custom little program. It wasn't that little, to convert all this data for their tens of thousands of employees. And at the time, there seemed to, and that small little program then mushroomed into an entire suite of programs to help companies move data from whichever email platform they were on to whichever email platform they wanted to go to. So there was a little bit of luck involved. I think there's a little bit of luck in success. And we were at the right place at the right time and had the right skill set. And then we're able to really leverage what we developed for one customer to start selling to thousands of others. And I'm sorry if this is taking too long, but I'll get to the point. It got to the point where IBM said, hey, a lot of our customers, need your program to get to our platform. Let us license it from you so that we can give it away for free and make the customer journey a lot easier. So we struck a multi-million-dollar licensing deal with them, and that really put us on the map.
That is incredible. And one thing that I heard you speak about was this idea of focusing on a niche area.
Yep.
And that would lead to obviously the success that you would have. But could you walk the audience through how you would obviously get to be, I think, over 200 employees across 12 countries? How, for those who may not have been able to experience that, I would obviously have to say many people have not been able to experience that. But what did that look like when you had maybe 5 employees and the hours that were actually put into it? It's not a 9 to 5, obviously, in an entrepreneurial journey. If you want to succeed, what did the behind the scenes actually look like, and the quote grind that we
Yeah, I mean, the grind was the proverbial, blood, sweat, and tears. There was a ton of work,
would.
and we were really fortunate. We got into the email space when email was growing and really exploding in the marketplace. And IBM was continuously competing with Microsoft, and then Google came into the mix. And then there were a couple of other smaller players that wanted to get some market share. So there was this, constant movement of email data, which, we benefited from tremendously because we became the email and calendar experts. So there was, continuous demand for our products, our services, our support, and that basically led us to continuously hire. So we were always understaffed and overworked. And when it was 5 employees, it was, 5 employees working 60-hour weeks. When it was 15 employees, it was 15 employees working 60-hour weeks. I remember incorporating that into my interview process. I would flat out tell candidates, if you're looking for a 40-hour a week job, this is not the place for you. And it rarely was. It was a ton of work at all the way to the very end, up until the very last day when we sold. There was no such thing as a 40-hour work week at this company.
That's unbelievable. And I think like you speak to the very fact if you want to succeed in life, it's not going to be a structured, in this case, career 9 to 5 job. You're going to have to put in those extra hours. And you speak about too that when you first were starting, you commuted actually a pretty far away distance to actually get to the company to obviously do your business.
Right.
But how the commitment to a goal, I mean, it's one thing to just, pop out of bed and drive 10 minutes, but the fact you were, 2 hours away, I believe if I read that correctly. But it really does. I think it speaks to the determination and the commitment to a goal and to succeed at the highest level that you believe yourself to be able to achieve. So I want to transition into the athletic side.
Sure.
And once again, I want to reiterate you have accomplished marathons, ultra marathons, triathlons. For somebody who's never even fathomed just running a 10K, for example, how did this journey in athletics come to be?
Sure. So my wife hates it when I call myself a couch potato, but I really was a couch potato. I didn't have any athletic background whatsoever, other than riding my bicycle as a kid. I like riding my bike around town. I was an avid skier, so I was very active in skiing. So I got out maybe 3-4 times a year, if that. So besides that, I had no athletic background. When I turned 40, I consider this my midlife crisis. All of the genetics in me started weighing heavily on me. Between my grandparents and my parents, they had it all: high blood pressure, diabetes, multiple forms of cancer, strokes, you name it, they had it. God bless them. And I knew that most of that stuff is hereditary, so I knew those genes were in here somewhere. So if and when I thought to myself, if and when they were to rear their ugly head, I
Yeah.
wanted to be in the best shape possible to fight those issues. And somebody at work, I just completed a triathlon, and I heard about it. And at that time, I thought a triathlon was this Olympic event that only like chiseled athletes, can compete in. And I had no idea that mere mortals can just go to a website, sign up for a race, train, and then compete. So I tried one, a very short distance triathlon, not the Ironman. And I just fell in love with the training journey, and then that sense of accomplishment when I crossed that finish line, and my young 9-year-old daughter, running up to me while I'm disgustingly sweaty and dirty and just hugging me and telling me how proud she was of me. I'm like, oh my God, I want to repeat this as many times as possible. And I set a goal for myself that night that somehow, some way, I'm going to get to the Ironman World Championship in Kona, Hawaii. And that was a 12-year journey, but I can break it down for you if you'd like, but I made that happen.
That is unbelievable. And just to when you did the sprint triathlon, my husband did a sprint triathlon,
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, and to your point, the accomplishment just to set out to start with that event. I remember watching and the swim, like I could swim to save my life, put it that way.
Right.
But I could not even remotely think about swimming. I like to bike, I like to run. But as you would go through, if you could kind of walk the audience through when you were training for that, because I do believe in life, it is all about the journey. That's where
Sure.
the personal growth happens.
Totally.
Um, and not only that, it's like you said, once you got to that destination and your family was there to congratulate you, it motivated you even more to take that next step. But taking it from that sprint triathlete or triathlon, what was like that next event? Like, how did you even think about, wow, maybe one day I really could do or an Ironman for that matter? Like, what was your mindset? Because I always like diving into the athletic mindset, competitive
Yeah,
mindset.
sure, sure. So yeah, so I can. By the way, I agree with you on the swimming front. I mean, I was never afraid of the water because I grew up in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, right on the water. I was always swimming, and by swimming I mean I would go into the waves, putz around a little bit, and for 10-20 minutes, and then come back. I was never a swimmer per se. I was just really comfortable in the water.
Sure.
It took me ever to learn how to efficiently swim with the proper breathing techniques, with the proper stroke, proper kicking. I still can't kick to save my life. I can swim for 10 miles, but I can't kick.
That's awesome.
um, yeah, so after completing that race, and I never knew about this thing called Ironman until that evening, and I just looked at that and recognized that that is the epitome of this sport. But I also knew that there was no way that I'd be able to swim 2.5 miles, bike 112, and run a marathon because I had just swam 800 yards, biked 12 miles, and ran 5K. So there was
Right.
a huge gap there between what I just did and what I wanted to do.
Sure.
And I just took a slowly but surely approach to it, right? So my next race was, I think, an Olympic distance triathlon. Then I ran a half marathon. Then I think I ran the New York City Marathon to give myself the confidence that I can actually finish a 26-mile, foot running event. So I started putting the building blocks together, and it was probably a year and a half journey from that first sprint until my first Ironman, where I built up the endurance, I built up the confidence, and I gave myself reassurance that I can actually get it done.
Okay, so as you speak about going from one event to the other, obviously you were already working too, like endless hours.
Oh yeah.
How, that's what I was thinking about when I was reading the book. Like, how did you legitimately fit the proper training in? Like you said, to be able to peak at the right time in these events, but then also even the stress. And I'm sure it was overwhelming as you're scaling your business to, like I said, over 200 employees. How did you manage that?
Yeah, I found out, and I preach this all the time. It's amazing how much exercise improves your day. If you start your day off with something as simple as a half an hour to 45-minute walk, or a crazy, 20-mile endurance bike ride, it doesn't matter. Both of those activities introduce, endorphins, into your system and a whole bunch of other, great chemicals, which just make for a really great and better feeling and productive day. So as I started doing this, I just started realizing that, my days were more productive. I felt better about myself, and the entrepreneurial journey and the endurance journey, there were just so many similarities that benefited from one another. All the planning, perseverance, execution, pivots, setbacks. I'm like, you know what? You just muscle through a 20-mile run over the weekend, and you're dealing with some issues at work on Monday. You know what? You got to the end of that 20-mile run. You'll get to the end of this issue as well. So the two really complemented each other so well. And I just, continued plowing forward on both.
That's unbelievable. Now, when we talk about success, I always think about there's always a village behind that successful person as far as the
Oh yeah.
support. Yeah.
Yes.
The support and just the encouragement, whether it's encouraging words, being there at obviously an event to be able to hug you as soon as you finish and celebrate with you. But how did your family feel once you started hitting those mile marks of, like I said, I mean, this is ultra endurance sports. Were they ever nervous for you behind the scenes, or were they sheer excited? Like, no, Steve, we're going for that next event. Like, let's do this.
No, there was definitely a decent amount of nerves. I remember going out to my first Olympic distance triathlon with my wife and younger daughter, and it's common practice to drive the bicycle course so that you familiarize yourself, with the course and the hills and the turns. And we were driving this bike course. I think it was someplace in Maryland, and it was really hilly. And my wife was like, I don't have a good feeling about this. This is a very hilly bike course. You've never biked this type of distance on these types of hills. So that just gave me like more encouragement, to get it done. So yes, there was a decent amount of nerves. Also, I went out with my wife to California many years later to do the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon, which involves actually swimming from Alcatraz back to San Francisco Bay. And those waters are incredibly choppy and very cold. So the night before the race, my wife and I did the touristy thing, and we went for the Alcatraz tour. The boat that we were on was being thrown left, right, and center. And she's like, "How are you going to swim in this tomorrow morning?" And I'm like, I'm just going to put one hand in front of the other and make my way through this mile and a half hellacious swim. And I did. So yes, to your point, there was some nervousness, and there still is, because especially with my mountaineering adventures, because there's just so much more, uncontrollable aspects when you're out there in the mountains. But so there's concern for sure, but there's just such an incredible amount of support, and it's fun for families as well. I've been at events where my daughter was racing or my sister was racing, and it's fun being a spectator as well. So it's a long day, but they do enjoy it, and they like the celebration at the end.
That's wonderful. And as you speak about too, like rough waters or storms, I feel like that's such a great analogy in life. Is sometimes you do have to go through the storms to then experience the sunshine on the other
Oh,
end, so to speak. And so I'm just wondering, as you were really into creating your company, Binary Tree, was there ever a moment that truly stands out to you now, where it was that so-called storm, but how you were able to overcome that and how it would propel you forward to obviously succeed in that business?
yeah. So just like with any business, there was definitely a lot of ups and downs. Unfortunately, we had a lot more ups, but we had our fair share of downs, and there was several events that led up to it. But the company was near bankruptcy at one point, probably at 2 points, much closer at this one point that I'm currently remembering, to the point where I was actually talking to friends of mine about just filing for Chapter 11 and joining them in their business. It was that bad. And I remember this day like it was yesterday, because I just saw the same friend this weekend. We were at the beach together, and I was laying out my plan to him to go join my other friend in his insurance business. And he's like, Steven, stick with what you know, suck it up. Buttercup. I don't think he said suck it up, Buttercup, but that's what he meant.
Right.
And I'm like, you know what? He's got a point. I don't know anything about insurance, even though I was confident that I would figure it out. I'm just going to go back on to work on Monday and, like I said, get her done. And that's
Well,
exactly what happened.
and you know what? I think too, passion towards something that you are so interested in. I really do feel that you could overcome so many challenges by following the strengths that you have. Like you had mentioned, even from the very beginning, I know you were talking about, I believe it was your mom that presented this course to you, and how you already had that interest in computers.
Right.
And so I think it really helps time go by, but then also too, when you are in those muddy waters, to be able to get through them much easier than when you just do something for maybe the money of it, and you don't really have that interest or that excitement to help you through those tough times. It could be more difficult in the end. So I want to transition with entrepreneurship. It's so unique, and I think it takes such a unique person to take those risks and to go through that, just like you were saying, that
Yeah.
those levels of uncertainty with entrepreneurship. For I teach a class, and for those students out there that maybe are entering the class just interested in opening up their mind to entrepreneurship, or perhaps already have started their own company, do you have any words of advice as they take this path?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest advice I can give is that they shouldn't go it alone, right? There's so many people out there, myself included, that have done a lot of things right, and as importantly, done a lot of things wrong, that can provide advice at every single stage, from the ideation stage to the minimally viable product stage, to the launch stage, to the maturity stage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anybody considering this should just reach out. And everybody not everybody, there's so many people that want to give back to the community, that are going to be much more generous, with their time and their advice than you would think. I think a lot of folks are hesitant to ask successful people for help, because they feel that they're too busy. They're not going to respond, et cetera, et cetera. I think folks would be pleasantly surprised by the response they would get if they would just reach out to folks in the specific area that they're looking to pursue.
I think that's so important because it can save you so much time too.
Oh yeah.
As you're, especially if you're a young entrepreneur and you've never experienced this before, but to reach out maybe before one problem becomes a massive problem, you can
Yeah.
maybe stop that. So that's excellent advice. And that kind of coincides with you also got a coach as you were going through all of your adventures with triathlons and marathons and ultra marathons. So when did you actually reach out for help when you were going on this athletic journey?
Sure. So all the way up until Ironman, I kind of winged it and I did it myself. I mean, there's plenty of, training plans available online. And I really felt that I can get this done by myself up until Ironman. When I got serious about Ironman and I got accepted to one and it was on the calendar, I really wanted to ensure success. So I reached out to a triathlon coach, the one that has finished an Ironman and one that has a lot of Ironman experience under his belt, because I knew I say this in my book multiple times. Whenever you do something for the first time, um, without expert guidance, your results are going to be suboptimal at best or a failure at worst. I did not want to not cross that finish line at Ironman. It was a Herculean effort. I mean, there were just so many obstacles, to this type of event. I wanted to, stack the odds in my favor. And I didn't, while I winged the New York City Marathon, thank God got that done. I did not want to wing a full blown Ironman. And the coach was phenomenal. It was a great experience. And I've had one ever since.
I think that speaks volumes, though, because it does take a lot of courage to ask for help and to put your ego aside and to make sure, obviously, in this case, that you're doing something in a very healthy way, simply because of your own body and your own health. But I think that has such a good lesson behind it for as successful as you are in business and in athletics, that you still reach out for help for somebody who's already been there, done that. So you could at least make the road more smoother, so to speak, as you journey through.
Oh,
So
yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, and I'm speaking to my younger self right now. I wish I had reached out for help earlier on in my career. I mean, I surrounded myself with fantastic advisors later on, which helped me really scale the company and march towards a successful exit. But had I made that decision earlier and had I shut my ego off earlier, the journey could have been a lot smoother, a lot earlier than it was.
sure, but we live in, you live and you learn, so to speak.
Sure.
And looking back in hindsight, there's always maybe different roads or paths that we could have taken, but ultimately it leads you to obviously present day.
Sure.
And so one thing that really stood out to me was how you encompass both technical skills and verbal skills, selling, and now obviously you're in advising. Was those two like areas, if you will, do you feel blessed with both, or did you actually have to develop, maybe you already had those technical skills, but like the verbal skills and selling your company to other people, did that come natural to you ultimately?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that. I think I'm going to go with blessed. I took a lot of courses in both, right?
Did-
But no, I never took a speaking course. But I think I was a natural born salesperson because I was successful in selling my company's products and professional services. Actually, I take it back. I was successful in selling myself during interviews before I started my own company. And I actually remember getting a lot of compliments in just the way I presented myself and my abilities. So that gave me the confidence to continue to do that positive, confirmation. On the technical side, that was just the nonstop learning, right? Because technology continuously changes, it's still evolving, and you don't just I mean, maybe some people can naturally pick it up. I didn't. Every computer programming language that I know because I learned it, or I got assistance with it.
That's incredible because I think with with sales, a lot of the times I've had conversations before how it's not even so much about the knowledge about the product, but like you said, how you present yourself, how you really focus or zoom in on the need of the customer, and how your product could obviously be the solution
Hmm.
in that scenario. So it's not so much hard sale, because a lot of people get turned off by that, but
Sure.
to be able to understand all the soft skills like emotional intelligence.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's huge. Could you maybe speak to that? I'm sure you have many instances.
Oh man, I have so many examples of people that just don't have the necessary emotional intelligence. In my mind, the two pillars to emotional intelligence is controlling your reactions and understanding how you're coming across. I have a ton of examples of people just really don't have a complete appreciation for how they're coming across to others, and others that just don't have the ability to react properly in various circumstances. So emotional intelligence is so incredibly important, and there's so many books written on the topic. I can't suggest them highly enough that people understand what an EQ is. And if they have it, great. If you read a book on EQ, you'll either check off, yep, I'm good, or say, oh my God, I'd never realized that I do things that way, and maybe there's room for improvement there.
It's so true, because I was in pharmaceutical sales for a very short stint. But I do believe it taught me so many skills when you walk into an office, and like you said, to be self-aware, to be aware of the actual environment. For example, there was many times I would go in there and the physician is lined up with patients, maybe backed up for that matter. And so being mindful to say, like, hey, even though, yes, this is one stop that I need to speak with him or her, that now's not the time. Maybe I'll come back, but not to force yourself, because then you could ultimately lose the opportunity to even walk in that office again.
Right.
But the self-awareness, I do think, is critical, and not even in sales, even if you're not in sales, but being able to
Oh, sure.
read personalities. There's all different types of personalities, of course, out there.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, you have so many different experiences that I'm so excited to ask you about. But with regards to your family, and like I said, I always want to be able to take a step back and to realize what it's actually like for family members to support such a feat, both in business and in athletics. Your wife also had, as far as the book goes, she had a job of her own,
Right.
raising two kids. So could you maybe speak to that balance with work, with life in general, if you don't mind speaking to that?
No, not at all. I mean, it was a continuous juggling act, right? So there's just so many demands that the job put on me personally and puts on everybody. But we made sure that family always came first, and that's kind of hard to say because I'm guilty of not having the proper work-life balance. Definitely for the first 10 years of the business, the work-life balance was completely out of whack. It was just a ridiculous amount of travel, and the demands of the business were huge. And but when I was home, I made sure that we spent as much time as possible with family, with friends, and prioritize the kids, right? So my two girls, they were into dance, so I spent countless hours driving them to and from dance. Thank God for laptops, because I was able to do things to work while they were dancing and work at their competitions while other teams were up on stage. I didn't care about other teams so much. I cared about my daughter's teams when they were up on stage. So laptops saved the day. And yeah, it was continuous juggling, and they definitely they benefited from the success, right? So they saw that daddy works hard, and because daddy works hard, we're able to do these things. We're able to live where we live. We're able to go on these trips, and things like that. So they understood the payoffs from some of those sacrifices. And I try to turn every single race into a family vacation. So they definitely, even though spectating for an Ironman race is a very, very long day. But when it happens in another country, it's kind of fun too.
That is fantastic. And you kind of already answered the next question, but when you look back, the lessons just by watching you in business and athletics that maybe your children were able to pick up at a young age, is there something that really stands out now that you see, wow, she probably got that from me because, I was grinding as far as business goes, or I never stopped training for all my athletic events? Like, was there any influential lesson that you see now instilled in them?
Oh, I think my younger one, I mean, she's been called Mini Me forever because she is Mini Me. I mean, even though both my daughters have completed triathlons, my younger one has got to the half Ironman level. She's done the New York City Marathon twice with me. And less than a year ago, she quit her job and she started an advertising agency of her own. So she's definitely, I know that I have influenced her tremendously and she's following in my footsteps. The older one is doing a fantastic job as a speech therapist, and she's not inclined to go the entrepreneurial route yet, to be determined. But she loves her job and she's incredible at it. So she's doing really well there.
See, I always like to really focus on parents and the influence that they have, because a lot of the times, like I said, that one person may be in the limelight, but to be able to see that there was so much encouragement throughout the years and support, and let alone, like I said, the influence that a parent could truly have, and how children at a young age, they may not say much, but they are watching and they
100%.
are learning. So that's so interesting to hear from, like I said, the level that you are at and the extreme work hours, extreme training hours for athletics, but for them to be able to witness that and to know that, it's going to take hard work to succeed in life. And so, as far as some, just a rounding out question, is there anything that really stands out to you that you are most proud of present day?
I'm proud of how my kids came out, right? So we must have done something right, and I don't take full credit. I give my wife as more credit than me for how they came out. I mean, they're just phenomenal, caring individuals that are. My older one is, like I said, is a speech pathologist for younger kids, and just she's helping. I over COVID, while she was still living at home, I overheard her with all of her patients on her Zoom calls, and it was just so heartwarming to see all this help that she's providing to these kids that are in need of her expertise and assistance. So I'm beyond grateful for how she's turned out, and the entrepreneurial bug that my younger one was bitten with, and the grind that she's going through right now is amazing to see.
That is fantastic. And with your like present day, you are in advising. I didn't want to miss this one question here, but
Sure.
present day, you are in business advising. And so, understanding that you are specializing in information technology, do you also step out of that market, so to speak, or that industry and help other entrepreneurs, or do you just primarily stay within that market?
No, sure. So my subject matter expertise is in the IT space, but I work with many founders that are completely outside the IT world, and I have found, because I was part of a CEO peer group in the past with companies that were in multiple industries, and I actually lead a peer group right now as well with that have companies in my peer group that are in multiple industries. There are so many issues that founders and entrepreneurs face that are identical across the board, right? So if without getting into the specifics of the manufacturing companies or the medical company or the IT companies, challenges that they may be having. I mean, everybody has, financial issues. Everybody has human resources issues. Everybody has geographical issues. Everybody has, IT issues, internally, from just a systems and process perspective. So there's just a ton of, similarities across the board that I'm able to assist with.
That is fantastic to be able to have the experience that you've had, obviously, in business, and now be able to give back to multiple entrepreneurs and especially those maybe younger entrepreneurs coming up and just in need of a little bit of advice at the early beginning to make that right turn, so to speak.
Sure.
So to round it out, we always like to end with a positive note. So, Stephen, I've certainly had a lot of quotes from you, but do you have maybe one to leave the audience with on a positive note?
I'm a huge fan of envisioning the finish, right? Manifestation is an incredibly powerful tool. It's proven, right? The human mind doesn't know the difference between an event that actually occurred or one that is expertly envisioned. And you don't have to be a expert meditator to get this done. You can just watch a YouTube video or two to meditate and to envision what it is your goal is, whether it be financial, whether it be personal, sports related, relationship related, whatever. If you can expertly envision it, the human mind will actually help you make decisions during the day to help you march towards that goal. So everybody can set and achieve really big goals, and envisioning it is one of many tools that'll help you get there.
I agree with you, Stephen, because I have a vision board. I do vision boards. And then also I do journaling every morning.
I love it.
And yes, and it's so true. I think when you're able to be in a quiet area and really think through your thoughts and where they could potentially lead without, anybody really knowing or making fun or like, there's no way you could do that. But to be able to write it down and to think through all of your goals from short-term goals that you can make for yourself, eventually to those long-term goals, and then ultimately achieving success. But I'm such a firm believer in visualization and just writing things down, thinking your thoughts through. So,
Yeah.
Stephen, it has been a fantastic time having you on the Plenty of Positivity
Oh,
podcast.
thank you.
And I wish you immense amounts of success. Obviously, you've already had so much success so far, but I wish you the best in your advising.
Thank you, Courtney. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Stephen.